Hey, howdy everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed that intro as much as we did. Crack up about meetings. And if you didn't get the theme, we're talking about meetings today. I'm Doug Cothe with both People Smart Group and Organizational Health Collective. I'm the founder of both those organizations and a consultant with People Smart Group. And here with my good friend Terry.
And I'm Dr. Terry Wager, principal consultant with the Generator Group. And my partner is Christine. She is not on this call, but she is the better member of the group. And I am also a member of the Organizational Health Collective. And tell us a little bit about that before we get going.
Absolutely. So the Organizational Health Collective is a gathering of consultants and internal practitioners who love to are involved with, and we work in the organizational health arena. And so we are working as consultants with companies, organizations, and we're letting businesses know that we believe the greatest multiplier for their business is for results as to basically grow a healthy organization. And so we're consultants that get together as the Organizational Health Collective that are helping each other grow in our expertise, grow in community to help one another, stay connected, stay in basically where we're helping one another in our businesses, helping one another with contacts, networking, all that kind of stuff, as well as growing in content, those sorts of things. So sorry, I got a little off there, Terry.
That's all right. That's all right. You know, I had a friend of mine the other
my brain had a moment.
I have a friend the other day that came to me and we were talking about his organization. I'm consulting with him, and he was talking about, Terry, you don't understand how deep this organizational health thing goes. And I was like, I think I do. That's why I got into it, because the level of culture and how fast it can get infected if people are not paying attention to their level of vulnerability and their level of openness working within the system, and at the same time how department to department and how in depth it goes. And so if you think about like COVID, and the reason I bring that up is because I think everybody kind of knows what that is at this point. But how fast that infected people, and it caused a nationwide pandemic. Well, I think that a culture that is unhealthy, I don't like the word toxic, because people aren't toxic. Yeah. Their behavior is really actually maybe shutting things down or blowing things up, but they're not toxic. We're not going to walk away and die from a toxic thing. But it is infectious, whether we're going for cultural and building it in healthy or building it unhealthy, and both are infectious. And so I think it's really important, if you want your facility, your organization, your company, however you're putting your business, if you want to see it grow, organizational health is the multiplier. And that's why I focus on that as a cornerstone or a foundation for anything after that, because the smart is multiplied by the healthy.
That's a good way to say it. I appreciate that.
And so it was pretty funny when he's telling me that. He's like, you don't understand. I was like, I do.
Yeah, so if you're running a business out there, and you could have the greatest technology in the world, you could have the greatest process plan, you could have the greatest service and the greatest product, but if your people, your human element is getting clogged up, you have political infighting, you have people who just don't care, don't want to work. We have so many companies today that are struggling to find people, or the right people, or who people are just whatever, and they're in or they're out or they don't care. If that's your case, organizational health is for you, and you want to find a good consultant.
And as we talk about that, kind of brings us to our topic today, which is why we am I hitting the right button? Should we abolish meetings? Why do we want meetings? Why are meetings a waste of time? And so let's talk about that a little bit, Doug.
That's a great question.
A waste of time?
Yeah, I mean, I hear people all the time. It's like, hey, meetings are just a waste of time. Let's just get rid of them. Let's do away with them. I'm so sick of meetings. I'm so sick of sitting in meetings. Can we just go do the real work? right? Have you not heard that commentary?
I have heard it, and in
Oh
fact,
gosh.
I've heard like I'm too busy trying to make my business work to have a meeting.
So what's the real
And
problem? The real problem is we sit in meetings that are just information dumps, right? That cup at the beginning that people saw. It's like I sat in a meeting that should have been an email. What do? I'm sitting there and I'm listening to someone either on a PowerPoint, or we sit around a meeting and everyone's reading a report that you could have sent me on an email, and I could have just sat there and read quickly, gotten done with, and gotten to my work for the day. Or I could have sat there and you could have sent me what was in the PowerPoint. I didn't need
okay,
that as a meeting.
okay, so I think this applies to 3-day events too.
Yeah.
I'll set the stage. I was at a huge conference for a very, very huge QSR chain, which is a quick service restaurant chain. And they had all of the presenters out there, but then it was all presentations, but the presentation was 100% PowerPoint with a speech that everybody read off the teleprompter.
Mm.
And I, the teleprompter thing was way back behind me it was huge on the ceiling. And I look back and I see it and I'm like, I spent years learning how to speak on stage from my personal experience without reading, and I got chastised a lot for reading if I read. And so and I don't know if you've ever heard a guy named Larry Wingett, but you do not want him to chastise you.
No.
Let me tell you. Or his partner, Suzanne Evans, both of my coaches, they were wonderful people and they're very good at what they were teaching. And I learned that nobody wants to be read to, which is kind of, unless you're a child with a bedtime story and whoever's reading has very good inflection, then, my mom was a great story reader and that was wonderful, but I don't want to go and spend a bunch of money to go to a 1-day, 2-day, 3-day and have them read slides to me. It just, or read a whole speech on a teleprompter. It's not real. And for me, it's exactly, the information is pertinent, but I could read that myself. What I want to hear is their enthusiasm, their excitement about the information, or stories about the information that illustrate the points they're trying to make. And that for me is really much more important than the information, because I have Google. I don't know if you've ever heard of Google, but I have Google. I spend the $12 or $18 a month for my little Google thing, and I get all of the mail, and I got all the stuff that I can get information. It doesn't really make sense to go and have them tell me something I can read.
Yep.
But I don't know
the thing. Is it relevant to me, right? It's got to be pertinent. It's got to be relevant. It's got to be personal, right? Why does this matter? Why am I here? Why am I sitting in this meeting? If you can't answer that question for me, I don't need to be here. You should just put it in an email.
Absolutely. And so I do think that there's times for emails. There's also the idea of, if it can be said, discussed, and taken care of in 5 minutes, you don't need a meeting for that.
Right.
It's what is the real outcome, and what is the context of the meeting, and I don't think people really pay attention to the context. And there's a statement that was going around, especially 2020, 2021, when everybody went to Zoom and everything. Content is king. Content is king. It's still going on. People are 3 years late with this idea. Content is king. Oh, you just figured this out? But content is king, but context is the kingdom. One of my a guy named Mitch Axelrod shared that idea with me a number of years ago, and it's, the content doesn't matter if you have no context. And so one of the big pieces that's really important is context is vital, and not just vital. Everything kind of falls apart with when you don't have the context of what you're talking about. And so for me, going into the meeting, understanding what it's about and what the outcomes are about are really important.
Yeah. So there's that reality that it needs to be pertinent. There's that sense in which this matters, that this is important to me. There's a vested interest. And that doesn't exist in so many meetings today. And so that's a part of the problem, right? We go into meetings and we're sitting there going, oh, great, I'm just going to waste 2 hours because this doesn't really affect me. This doesn't matter to me. It's got to matter. It's got to be personal. It's got to be something I want to understand, something that I leave here with, because it's going to affect my life.
Absolutely. The other piece that I like to bring up every time I talk about meetings is it's not the meeting's fault if it's boring or chaotic. It's not the meeting's fault if there's a problem. It's not the meeting's fault if somebody takes offense. It's not the meeting's fault. The essential piece of the meeting that causes all the problems is the people and how they go in.
Yep.
Because let me tell you, if the meeting didn't have people in it, it would be a pretty good meeting.
So let me pause you there. So who is responsible for how the people go in, Jerry?
That's a great question, and I do believe that, of course, we always kind of gravitate towards that idea that the leader is responsible. But it's not just the leader or the CEO of the company; it's the leader of that particular meeting. And so whoever's calling that meeting, if it's an HR meeting, then whoever's running the meeting from the HR place, it's their responsibility to create the context, to create the objectives. And I'm not talking about agenda, because agenda is something different. And sometimes it's a useful thing, and sometimes it's not useful. In a tactical meeting, it's not really useful right away. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, and I would, so the leader needs to make sure that that meeting actually means something to the people they're inviting to it, right? The leader needs to make sure that there is a sense of drama, importance, significance to those people, that they're coming and they're excited for why they're coming to that meeting, because they know, and not excited in the sense of, hey, my gosh, this is so fun to go to this meeting, but they're invested in the sense that, hey, this meeting, I'm going to walk away with some important stuff for what I do. And if I don't go to it, I'm going to miss something important for what I do. And I have to be there or I'm going to miss something important. It's like being a student, and if you don't go to the class, there's going to be something important on the test. There's going to be something important that I miss for my career. There's going to be something important I miss for my life. You've got to make it so it means something to me, or why am I there?
Right.
And that's the leader's job. Now, as the person coming to the meeting, there's also a responsibility on me as someone who's invested in my job to take some ownership and show up to that meeting with a little bit of sense of, hey, I'm going to take some responsibility here too. But as the leader, you got to create that context.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying there about the idea of there's a responsibility of the attendees. I've said it over and over and over again. I'm a recovered alcoholic. I've been going to 12-step meetings for years. And one of the things they say is the people that are going and not necessarily sharing are just as important as the person sharing, because without the audience, so to speak, there wouldn't be the recovery that goes on in there. And so there's this idea of, we have the people sharing, but we have to have somebody to share too. And if everybody's like, screw them, or I don't want to hear this, it really ruins the mood. And, if you're talking about a meeting where we're actually trying to get some kind of work done, some kind of decision made, some kind of tracking of progress, whatever that meeting might be, if people are just kind of like this, or, oh my God, it's actually disrespectful, for one. And two, somebody said to me a long time ago, if the meeting isn't actually doing something for you, it's because you're not adding to it.
That's good.
And this was in a 12-step thing. It was a sponsor of mine back in the 90s. And I was like, hey, screw you, you know what I'm talking about. But then as it melted into my head, I was fresh then. As it melted in my head, and I started to realize that, my responsibility in this meeting is to add to it. And if I feel like I'm not getting anything out of it, it's because I'm not adding to it. either in listening, asking questions, sharing my opinion, or saying, hey, wait a minute, we're off topic here.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, there's something that I can do. If I'm feeling like I'm checking out, there's something I can do to check back in and make that meeting good.
Yep. Yeah. For the meetings being a waste of my time, maybe it's because I didn't point out we're off topic. Or maybe it's because I didn't say, hey, guys, this isn't why we're here. You're wasting my time. Can we get back to what we're here for? If you guys needed one off at the end of this to talk about your fantasy football team, why don't you have that? Let's get back to what we're here to talk about.
Or within this topic of the meeting, and they're in context, they're covering the content they need to, and I feel like I don't matter. That's me. Yep. If I feel like I don't have anything to add, that's me.
Yep.
If I feel like they're going in a different direction and I've just decided to reject myself in my own mind, saying they don't care what I think, that's me. Yep. And I need to step in and go, wait a minute, what about this idea? Or I need to actually step into that danger. I need to be vulnerable and say, look, I don't necessarily agree, or I have this other idea, but I need to put my information in.
Yeah.
Because I might be walking away with something that they never thought about, but I rejected my idea before I ever said it. And so my fault, the thing tanked because my idea might have actually changed the trajectory. And I don't know that it would, and I don't know that it wouldn't, but the only way to find out is put it in there.
Well said. Yep. Yep. So in the midst of that, why as a leader do you want to have the meeting? What's the value to the leader of the meetings?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I think really clarity is always the goal with anything we're doing, and a meeting is a very, very easy way to get clarity among a group of people. And when we go into a meeting, no matter what kind of meeting it is, the overall objective is to get clarity on next steps. And so we may have a little bit of a state of the union of where we're at currently, but we're always wanting to move to where are we going? Because if we don't care where we're going, then it doesn't matter. We shouldn't have the meeting.
Right.
And absolutely. If we don't have an idea of where we're at, that sounds like an ad hoc meeting right there. We need to figure out where we're at. And so really for me, the leader wants to have a meeting, one, to bring people together, but two, to really clarify direction and get that clarity.
Yeah. And my argument is, what's your alternative? Your alternative is what? You're going to send out emails? How many emails are you going to save by having everyone in one room and saying it once?
Well, right. And then
how many emails do you have to send back and forth to how many people to get everyone on the same page? 100?
Right.
I mean, really, that's absurd. And so to really be able to, you accomplish in a fraction of the time, everyone in one room having the conversation, and we all leave. If you do a meeting well, you save a ton of time.
Absolutely. There's no doubt that, I have another story about, a friend of mine bought a 7-unit complex, and he came in and new ownership, and all of the rents were really low. And he was I was coaching him on investments and being a landlord, basically. And he was like, I'm going to go in and talk to each one of them and talk about raising the rent. And I was like, don't do that. Don't do that, because as soon as you start talking to one person versus another, the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to go back to talk to each other about the landlord that just came in and screwed them.
Yep.
Right. And so your best bet is to pull them all out of their homes, all in the front yard, and have a ad hoc meeting, right? Yep. And we're using that term as one of the 4 meetings we actually suggest having, but have an ad hoc meeting about rent going up, and then give a State of the Union, talk about what has happened and transpired and why you were able to get the deal the way you did, and be transparent. I was like, be very vulnerable and be transparent. It's like, this building was not taken care of. I got it the way I got it because he was not taking care of it. but I want to take care of it. And so I want to let all of you know that rent is going to be increasing, but it's for you and it's for the good of this building, because we want to see the improvements. And really, I looked it over. I did all of the preliminary work when I was buying the building, and it needs a lot of help. And so that means you guys got to contribute. It's where you live, and I want to make sure you have a safe, comfortable place. Well, he did that, and he was amazed at how, one, they saw how strong this guy showed up, and there was no talking behind each other's back, because they all understood now what was going on, and they all heard the same talk. Yep. And so they couldn't go, oh, what did he say to you? What did he say to you? What did he say to you? And there was none of that water cooler. He heard the same talk. And amazingly, every one of them, one, let them know how much they respected it, and two, although they were afraid that it was going to go higher than they thought they could afford, they understood it and they're excited for the changes. And so it's a really good example of what happens when you pull everybody together and tell them the news at the same time.
Yeah. Wow. Great example. Yep. And so there's a beauty in meetings. It's not just, hey, let's just cancel all meetings. It's actually, let's have meetings and do them well. And so leaders need to understand there's a skill to meetings. There's an art to meetings. There's an understanding of meetings, and you have to do them well and you have to do them right. And so one of the problems with meetings is, one, we do the information dump with unnecessary information for those that are in the meeting. And number two, we often talk about is we do meetings that we are basically trying to accomplish solving problems that shouldn't all be in the same meeting, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so we talk about that. We talk about, we take what should be in a tactical meeting, which is the, hey, day-to-day, week-to-week stuff that we should be accomplishing and needs to be accomplished in the next few days or next few weeks. And we put that together with that big picture stuff that, hey, I got to figure out, hey, this is a big problem to solve, and we need to take some time and think about, and we stuff that in the same meeting. And all of a sudden, now we're sitting there on something we need to really debate and talk about for quite a long time with the stuff we need to make a quick decision on. And so now we're trying to figure out, and we're going from this, hey, I got to kind of ponder stuff, down to this quick decision stuff, and back up to the ponder stuff. And you can't shift gears like that back and forth in the middle of a meeting that quick. And so
no, it's actually pretty impossible. And if you think about it, even kids in school, years and years ago, they had one classroom for every subject, and they put the book away and then pull the book out. And then they started actually separating classes and making the kids move. And one of the reasons from the psychology world that I see they did that is kids have a really hard time changing cognitive set. Yeah. And so when you put the book away and pull a new book out, but you didn't get up and move, you're still in the old mindset, or you're still in the old ready to learn that stuff. But when you put the book away and then get up and leave that room and then pull a different book out, you've actually changed your setting, which makes it easier to change your cognitive set. And so you really do want to separate those two things. You don't want to talk about big wonder type, what are we going to do with this big problem thing? In a tactical, what are we getting done on this project we've already decided on? And so understanding those two things are very, very different is very important.
Yeah. And so our recommendation for so many folks is what? You need to, come up with and have different types of meetings in the course of that. And we have solutions, and that answers our other question of, is there really a solution that goes along with that? And we would say, yeah, there's solutions other than getting rid of meetings, right? And we would say that's a big piece of that is, hey, let's actually separate out meetings into separate types of meetings that fit the different grids of what we really need to do in a meeting.
Absolutely. And when we separate out the meetings, what we do is we actually create a structure for a whole business on how we communicate more effectively. And so when we're doing the tactical kind of week to week thing, it's one meeting that can be fairly brief, but we want to get through all of the different things that we've got going on for our focal objectives, as I call them, and our standard operating objectives, which many of the people that I know call them And so this is our sales, this is our marketing, this is where we're at with all these different things. This is our fulfillment and what we're doing. But these are the different projects we're doing for our 90-day goal, and really getting clear on that for our tactical meeting and being able to check in on each one of those very quickly. And then if we have one of those or two of those that are problematic, we can drill down on those. But we don't want to go into, oh my God, we got 3 big problems. Let's talk about each one of those, because we'll be there all day. We want to separate that into another meeting that is pretty much that topic alone. And there's research done. And in that ad hoc meeting, as we call it, that's where you actually create an agenda. You do a lot of research around it. You make sure you have your piece of it, and you come prepared. Like you said, Doug, we don't want to go in and then discuss all of our research. We want to bring a summary of what we found out and what we think our best recommendations are for that.
Yeah. And we need some space to debate back and forth. We need some space to really dig deeper together and not just make quick decisions. We need that back and forth. We need that time to really ask our questions and get our minds together around the situation, around what are we thinking about this, and come to a conclusion together the best we can. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean we make decisions by consensus, but it means we all have to have had time to get out our thoughts, get out our questions, get out everything. So when we leave that room, we can at least be on the same page when we make a decision.
Well, and the interesting thing is a lot of people are discussing a topic like that, and this is very interesting. In a meeting, they have an ad hoc meeting. They're doing really good with this one topic meeting, but they don't actually create the context around the vision of their company or the mission of their company or what values they're living by. So they're trying to decide this, but they forget to link it back to why they're even in the business. And so one of the things that I do very, very strongly and very emphatically is, how does whatever we're talking about affect the vision of the business? How does it, is it within our mission? Is it because we're doing this? Does it fit? Because actually you can finish that meeting very quickly. If it doesn't fit your vision and it doesn't fit your mission, why are we talking about this?
Right. Absolutely.
And so really make sure that this is within the guidelines of what we're trying to do as our business's reason for existence. If it doesn't fit in there, we don't even need to have that meeting.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. If this doesn't fit our why, if this doesn't fit our values, if this doesn't fit our what we do and our strategic anchors, then hey, we're out quick, right? And then if it does, well, now we've got time to dive in there and really discuss and really have that productive conflict we talk about all the time.
Absolutely.
We can dive in and discuss, and then we can get to that really good decision.
And really, I think about that idea of the productive conflict. And one of the things I think about is, everybody sees conflict as bad. And the table group, Pat Lencioni talks about entering the danger, and Brene Brown talks about entering the rumble. But I see it as entering an adventure. Why do we have to make it all scary? It's really the adventure of what's going to come out of a bunch of people who care about where we're going and what we're doing, that are playing by the same values. Let's get in there and see where this adventure of this conversation is going to take us, because we may find out that we're going in a totally different direction than we should be, or we should be going in a different direction than we are. But every conversation, when we get into that, as long as we're open, as long as we're interested in making sure that everybody's on the same track, it is all about the adventure.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, and in a sense, what you're doing is you're holding up your greater purpose, and you're sticking to it.
Absolutely.
And you're saying, how are we going to make sure that our purpose, our meaning that we've agreed upon, that we're pushing toward, is primary?
Absolutely.
And so it's not a hey, you win or I win. It's a we win by holding up the greater purpose.
Right. And the reality is, I don't think a business can survive if it doesn't have meetings.
Yeah.
But also, it can implode itself if it's having meetings in an incorrect way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we see a lot of, and that's why a lot of people are saying get rid of meetings, right?
Right.
But
Baby with the bathwater.
don't do that because you're going to destroy the company the other way. You get rid of the meetings, and
Right.
now what are you going to do? How are you going to
Right.
accomplish things?
There needs to be a balance, and
Yeah.
a pendulum has two areas where it's not really going to be good in the business. You know, right,
Yep.
left side. You don't want to be there. You want to be somewhere in the middle. And really,
Yep.
it's about bringing intention into your meetings. What is the context of this? What's going on? How long are we going to be spending on this? And then when we're talking about ad hocs, it's not about how long we spend on it. It's about where do we really want to end up at the end of this. And I
Yep.
think every meeting we want to really kind of have an idea of objectives and where we want to end up.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. So I think we would say, let's get rid of crappy meetings. Let's not get rid of meetings. Let's just get rid of
let's
crappy
get rid of
meetings.
crappy
Or
meetings.
let's
Yeah,
do good
absolutely.
meetings. You know,
Absolutely.
I've got a story I'd love to sort of bring toward the end here. Is I've got a CEO I was working with, and I'm coaching him through this, and he hit a point of total meltdown in his company. They had lost several clients, and it was pandemonium. They were all worried. We don't have the finances coming in anymore. We're at a mad dash. We've got to replace those clients, and so they're all worried. And the CEO, just in the middle of things, is jumping in to try and make sure, hey, we got to replace these clients. We've got to do these things. And he's filling gaps where he's feeling the weight that people are not pulling their weight. They're not doing their job. They're not doing the things that we need to fill these gaps and get these new clients into this space. And I'm meeting with him, and he's ticked. I mean, he's frustrated with his employees that they're not doing their job. They're not doing what needs to get done that he's now doing. And we're talking through that. And I'm like, well, what are they doing? He's like, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing, but they're not doing this. I'm like, well, why don't you know what they're doing? And so we're going through this and we're talking about it. And he just continues on, and we keep meeting on a weekly basis. And finally, they get out of the craziness of this. And we sit down, and I'm like, okay, so have you had a moment to calm down and to have this conversation with them of what was going on in the background? What were they doing? And he says, yeah, I finally had that conversation. And I said, so what were they doing? He says, all sorts of other really important stuff that we really needed to have done. I said, okay, so here you are ticked off, and you had no idea what they were doing. Why? Why were you not understanding what they were doing? He says, because we weren't communicating. I said, exactly. And I said, okay, so all you needed to do to solve that problem on an ongoing basis was do exactly what? A daily stand-up would have solved that entire
Absolutely.
thing. 5
Absolutely.
minutes to 10 minutes daily, where you would have stood up and said, what are you doing today? 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 And it would have entirely been solved, because you would have known what everyone was doing. You could have corrected what needed to be done. And you wouldn't have spent all that stress being that mad the entire time, because you would have known what everyone's doing. You could have redirected them, and you would have known. And so now you're knowing every vital thing's being done, and you save the stress. And he was like, I am never again going to not have a daily stand-up. We're going to do that because
And until we forget that, and then we'll go back to it.
Right.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think about. Like a lot of businesses, they have that come to Jesus moment. Oh my God, we got to do this, and then they slide back into the norm, and they go, you know what, we're getting too busy. We'll have it tomorrow, and they'll let up on a path that's keeping them moving. I had the same thing happen with one of my businesses that I'm working with, where they weren't having the daily meetings because they were too busy trying to get things done. And then they were like, well, we don't want to have, and it was a construction business, and we don't want to have all of our laborers in the business too, and or in the meeting and everything. And I was like, you guys can have a happy medium, but you want to have each lead have a little 5-minute meeting with what they're doing, and then have a 5-minute meeting with the front office of what each lead is doing and what their underlings or what their workers are doing, so that there's communication throughout, and everybody knows what's going to be happening, and everybody knows that, oh, this one project over here is running behind. This project's ahead of schedule. Let's take a couple of your laborers, go over here and get caught up on this. If we're not communicating, we continue to have that gap widen. When we communicate, everything gets taken care of so much clearer and easier.
Oh my gosh. Yep. It's amazing. It's amazing how when we're doing well, communicating and having good meetings, everything goes so amazingly well. But when we're not, we're all frustrated with meetings and we want to do it with them, or we're all frustrated and there's no communication. And so folks,
the other interesting thing that happens is we're doing so well with meetings that we don't think we necessarily need them. And I used to see this a lot with people when I was in mental health, and bipolar or some of the other egregious mental illnesses that people have. They start taking their medication and they'd be like, you know what, I feel really good now. I don't think I need it anymore. And then they go off the rails.
Yep.
And we really need to take that into account and think about, if it's working really well, don't stop.
Oh, good. Well, yeah. Well said. Well said, folks. So, folks, do not give up on meetings. Do not quit. Just work to have good meetings. And leaders out there, hey, this is a skill. You need to learn how to run great meetings. And great meetings will help you hugely. Learn how to run a great meeting. We can help. Till next time, I'm Doug. Here's Terry. We're here to help you. Have a great day.